All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Frankie Flores, Director of the UNM LGBTQ Resource Center, and I'm super excited to have you all here today to take part in our panel, Queering COVID. I am going to have we'll have our panelists introduce themselves. I will read their bios. And before that, though, we will do our land acknowledgement. Founded in 1889, the University of New Mexico sits on the traditional homelands of the Pueblo of Sandia, the original peoples of New Mexico, Pueblo, Navajo, and Apache, since time immemorial, have deep connections to the land and have made significant contributions to the broader community statewide. We honor the land itself and those who remain stewards of this land throughout the generations and also acknowledge our committed relationship to Indigenous peoples. We gratefully recognize our history. Right, we are going to begin with with sharing the bios of our panelists. We are super excited to have a number of panelists from various places, various experiences as well. We will have the Q&A function open, so please feel free to ask any questions. We will be doing a Q&A later towards the end. And also I do want to actually point out that Michael, Josh, Tommy, Bunny, and myself are all part of the Imperial Court System, which is super exciting to have a panel from former monarchs also, right? And former and current individuals, not current reigning, but it is, for those who don't know, the Imperial Court System is we are a international organization who does fundraising specifically for trans and queer individuals. We have been around since the 60s, and Bunny actually is the Queen Mother of all New Mexico. So I'm going to start with Bunny. Bunny is a 48-year-old Latinx trans woman. She is currently chairwoman of Transgender Resource Center of New Mexico and just recently got accepted into the Emerge program. From homelessness, survival sex work, and drug addiction, she has worked hard to rebuild her life after rock bottom. Bunny looks forward to the possibility of running for elected office and showing trans and gender variant folks are a force to be reckoned with. Thank you so much for being here with us, Bunny.
Thank you.
All right, next up is T. Michael Trim, a native son of Ohio, currently serves the community at large as Director of Operations of the Transgender Resource Center of New Mexico. He uses his personal experience as a Black queer man of transgender experience to guide him as he works diligently to serve, empower, and uplift the communities dear to him. Black, brown, and Indigenous people of color, people of transgender experience, and underserved communities everywhere. His extracurricular activities include being a member of the International Imperial Court System, serving the trans and lesbian, gay, bisexual communities and their allies through charitable events, an avid reader, hopeless romantic, award-winning drag entertainer and pageant promoter, and animal lover. Thank you so much for being here with us. Next up, we have Josh Garcia, also known as Celia de Leon. You may know Josh as his alter ego, Celia de Leon. Josh is the current Miss New Mexico Pride and is also Empower Program Manager of Planned Parenthood of the Rocky Mountains. Josh has been an HIV advocate for many years, letting people know it's not what your status is that's important, but knowing your status that's more important. Thank you so much for being here with us, Celia. And last but not least, we have Tommy Sloan. Sorry, your bio went away for a second. Tommy Sloan has been the Empower Program Coordinator at the Space for the past 2 years. You may also recognize him as local trans drag king Tracy Michaels. Tommy likes to combine his a love of drag and HIV outreach and education to get people interested in testing and knowing their status while breaking down stigmas around HIV. And we also have with us from SHAC, Karen Lucero. And Karen Lucero, LPCC, Associate Clinical Director for UNM SHAC Counseling, has been with SHAC for over 2 years. Her pronouns are she, her, hers, and she is from the Pueblo Bisleta. She graduated from UNM with a BA in Philosophy and Economics and earned her master's in counseling from Southwestern College. Karen's career has been informed by Indigenous and queer personal values, as her focus is based on resilience factors supported by survivance. Thank you all so much for being here with us. I'm really excited that we were able to pull a panel together that will have experiences directly related to the university, but also to the community at large. So if I could have Michael and Bunny, if I could have you both talk about your work with TGRCNM and also your work at large.
Well, since I'll go first. This past year, my work with the Trans Center has been really limited to fundraising, doing online fundraisers, and getting money and supplies for bunny bags, which bunny bags at the Trans Center helps feed our trans participants, and while we're closed, because we're only open 3 days a week now, so we try to have bunny bags available every day that we're open, so that next day when we're not open, they have access to some kind of food. And but I do have my first vaccine, and so I will be planning on doing some more stuff at least once or twice a month at the center once I get my second shot and that time lapses. But yeah, that's what I've been doing at the center for the past year as chairwoman.
Thank you. And Michael.
I am actually new to my role as Director of Operations at the Transgender Resource Center of New Mexico. I moved to Albuquerque to assume this role this past November. And since then, being at the center every day that we're open, and most of the times when we're not, doing everything from running the day-to-day operations, which thankfully we've been able to remain open to continue providing services to the community, everything from food distribution that Bunny touched on to harm reduction syringe service or syringe exchange, as well as HIV testing. So we're remaining open and currently doing services actually outside to help stop and slow the spread of COVID-19. In addition to all of those things, working behind the scenes to do some improvements in the building, as well as making a strategic plan to start to bring our trans drop-in participants back in the building in a limited capacity so that we can expand our services.
Great, thank you so much. Do you mind actually sharing where TGRCNM is located?
Yes, our drop-in center is located at 5600 Domingo Road Northeast in Albuquerque. We are just north of Central.
Great, thank you so much. Bunny, you have mentioned your fear of being admitted to the hospital with COVID-19. Can you share why you'd be concerned?
You know, because historically speaking, no matter what hospital, no matter how much training they have on trans issues, trans people have historically not had great health care. We haven't been treated right by anyone that sees us in the hospital, be it the triage, be it intake, or the doctors and nurses. And not that I've ever had a bad experience, but that's always in my head. And with COVID, I'd be, what if I was sedated? I didn't have no one there with me because you can't have visitors. I would have no one there. either my family or a community member to advocate for me. And you know, in some states they were doing, I forgot the terminology for it, but they were like saying, okay, we're going to give this person treatment, but we're not going to give this person treatment. And I was terrified. Sorry. I was terrified that we would get to that here because we don't have a great hospital infrastructure here in New Mexico. Um, so I was terrified I'd get to that and I would be deemed not worth saving because I'm trans. You know, so I've had, you know, I know that might sound crazy to some people, but to me, that's just how I, you know, my survival is. I was just terrified to get COVID. So I've been very sheltered for the last year and it's starting to wane on my mental health.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing that, Bunny. That's, you know, it is an unfortunate reality. And, you know, I think that doing events like this actually helps break down those stigmas, right? Because we know that, you know, historically, you're right, you know, LGBTQ individuals within the medical community have been treated abysmally. And so, you know, I commend you for the work that you do because you are really breaking a lot of those issues and you are actually bringing to light some of the disparities that happen within the trans community.
Thank
And I
you. And
think,
thank you. Go ahead.
yeah, and I think that, you know, especially during COVID, right, there has been, people don't understand those fears that trans people have.
You know, and I wasn't just afraid for me. Of course, I was afraid for all of us. But, you know, as chairwoman of the Trans Center, you know, I wanted our staff to know if they didn't feel safe as trans people, they didn't have to be there. You know what I mean? That we would figure something out. And because I know I'm not the only trans person that feels like that. So I just, you know, we're very blessed that we have the staff that we do at the Trans Center and the volunteers we have, and they fought it out. And you know, no one tested positive. You know, so but that's still a worry that I have. You know, when Michael says they're going to bring people in, as Bunny the activist, I'm like, yes, let's get our people inside. But as the chairwoman, I get scared for our staff, but they've all been vaccinated. You know, they've all had their second shot. So, but it's still, you know, it's still something that worries me for our staff.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you for sharing that and elaborating on that, because I think, again, um, for folks who don't understand, you know, the transgender experience, don't understand those innate fears that we have, and that COVID has really brought on a different set of fears, you know, because you're right, you know, because part of that community care is finding that advocate who can go with you into the hospital and can tell people, no, this is how Bunny is addressed, right? This is
Yeah.
the pronouns that Bunny uses. And when we take that away, you know, you have to advocate for yourself, but you can't advocate for yourself if you're sick. Yeah, so thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Michael, so the Albuquerque Journal recently published an article highlighting some of the issues the trans community is facing during the pandemic. Can you elaborate on these?
The trans community at large, pre-COVID, is always disproportionately affected by resource insecurity. So whether that's housing, medical access, and food, and just really any sort of resource insecurity, the trans community has always been disproportionately negatively impacted. And COVID is no different. COVID has essentially just highlighted those insecurity issues for resources for trans folk and gender nonconforming individuals across the spectrum. So thankfully, the Transgender Resource Center has been able to stay open so that we can be there to fill in the gaps. We aren't open in a capacity of filling the gap in relation to the social structure, where the drop-in center typically was a place for community and gathering, and COVID has stripped us of that ability, but we can be there to ensure that our individuals are not hungry, to ensure that our individuals have warm clothes or a blanket or gloves, and we can be there to help fill in the gaps, you know, to a certain extent financially as well. So that's really what it means to me to be addressing some of these issues in a time of COVID, and doing the absolute best that we can to keep everybody safe. Just to reiterate what Bunny said, all of our staff have received both um, doses of the COVID vaccine. Our long-term volunteers are also in various stages of being vaccinated, and our staff is being, prior to vaccination, was being tested every 3 weeks. Um, and I am proud to say that we have not had a single positive case throughout this entire pandemic. So we have been scrubbing and cleaning and testing and staying away as best as possible to not only keep ourselves safe, but also to stop and slow the potential spread amongst our participants.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. Bunny and Michael, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what having a space like TGRC means for our trans community, and also with it being closed, how that has affected some of the participants at TGRC and M.
For me, having a space like Transgendered Resource Center, when I was homeless and doing survival sex work and hardcore in my addiction, I think if I had a safe place to go to be trans and be myself, that I might not have started doing what I was doing. That was like self-harming myself, or if it came along, or I would have had resources to get out of that. And for me, also, it's a place of community. It's a place where different socioeconomic trans people, because I think the narrative for most trans people is that we're poor, we're struggling, we're doing sex work, and it's not a mono. Being trans isn't a monolith. So there's a vast variety of different social and economic backgrounds in trans folks in Albuquerque. So it's a space where we can all be together, and I think it's magical to see college graduates in with homeless folks, in with trans people working retail, just every single facet of trans people. We're together, we're eating meals together. Those of us who've made it to the other side are being role models or examples that, hey, like, just because you're homeless now doesn't mean you're always going to be homeless. And a lot of times we bring our family members to the trans center, so they get to see the richness of being trans, so that's what the trans center means to me.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. That was really powerful.
For myself, TGRC is a place of belonging. Whatever need it is that you have in that moment, we're there to do our best to help fulfill that need and to bridge gaps, especially as Bunny mentions, with assisting folks in accessing services. Trans people are not a monolith, and despite being seen as, the quote unquote poor trans people that just always need help, we are smart, we are resilient, we are intelligent, we are resourceful. And sometimes the issue isn't that we are not capable, it's that we need the bridge to get to the other side. So TGRC likes to stand in the gap and to help bridge those resources for folks. Somebody knows that they need housing, but they might not know exactly where to go, where they will be welcomed, where they will be respected, and where they will be treated fairly. So at TGRC, we stand in the gap and we advocate for our participants and for trans folk throughout the entire state, and truthfully within the region, to help to train those providers so that they can be better allies and active accomplices in justice for our people. And we also advocate for legislation that protects and respects our people. And then we can provide those direct services to any individual that walks through our door. emails through the website, calls and leaves a voicemail on the phone, hits us up on Facebook or Instagram, and to really uplift and empower trans folk in a society that sometimes doesn't see us in the greatness that we possess.
Yeah, thank you for that. Wow. You know, and again, I know I say this often, but I am so, it's, the word amazing doesn't describe the work that y'all do, you know, because the reality is like, y'all are lifesavers, and y'all, you know, I'm so thrilled that we are at a point, right, where we're starting to change that narrative of the trans experience, you know, as you both have touched on in really eloquent ways. And so I appreciate having that conversation. So thank you guys.
You're welcome.
I just muted myself and didn't mean to. A year later, I still don't know how to work Zoom. So these questions are actually both for Trey and for Celia. So first, I wanted to ask, how has HIV testing changed at Empower?
You know, that's a great question. HIV testing has a little bit changed. During the COVID pandemic, we've never closed our doors. We've been open to provide rapid HIV testing. One of the things that we adapted was we normally use the Lear test, which is a 4th generation test, takes about 20 minutes. We decided to go ahead and get approval, and we started moving forward and using the Insta test, which takes about 60 seconds. There is a open window time frame on both. But it's better for our staff, for the person who's getting the tested. But we've always made sure to let the community know that we're here and you can still get your rapid HIV test and you can know your status. So that's how it's changed a little bit. Yeah.
Thank you. Trey, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think Josh covered it perfectly.
Actually, could you both also talk about, because you mentioned 4th generation, can you kind of elaborate on what that means?
Yeah, so there are several different tests out there. When a physician or somebody who's providing a test are talking about the generations, it's going to talk about the window period. So a 4th generation test can detect anything 3 weeks on. It will not detect anything in the last 2 weeks. A 3rd generation test can detect anything 5 weeks on as early. It will not detect anything in the last 4 weeks. So it's really important when somebody may have had an exposure or sexual encounter that they're trying to pinpoint when their last exposure is. So when we're doing testing, we do ask about when their last exposure, or what brings them in, or what some of their concerns and why are they getting an HIV test.
Thank you. Are y'all seeing any significant trends in HIV or STI transmission that you think that people should be aware of?
We did have seen the trends. Normally what you would see are individuals with bars and clubs such as FX, Sidewinders, Albuquerque Social Club being open. It was easy to go and get condoms. It was easy to go to the LGBT Resource Center to get condoms, get your test when you normally need it. Those are not accessible as it's been. So over the past 2 years, since the close down of March of 2020, we've seen an increase, not just within our agency, but agencies across the state, an increase in HIV and syphilis. We've seen the stigma of kind of going back to like the AIDS epidemic a little bit, and people worried about getting tested. And that's really where Trey has taken the steps of teaching individuals of what are the ways of talking to individuals about, you know, not just STI, but COVID testing, talking about if you're hooking up, we're part of Planned Parenthood. It's your body, it's your right, go hook up, we're human. It's a way to relieve stress, and, you know, we're all about it. And so really teaching about that with our Teen Empower and our Empower of what are you doing, and let's talk about what prevention means to you. Anything else you want to touch base on, Trey?
Yeah, one thing we've been really focusing on with our adult group is normalizing the talk of all testing, whether that's COVID, HIV, or just a routine panel STI testing. what I've seen with my participants is that by normalizing this conversation and normalizing that they are hooking up right now during a pandemic, it makes it easier for them to want to come and get tested, to talk about what's going on with them. And they share that with their friends. So what we've also been doing is a lot of outreach on the dating apps, Grindr, Scruff, Growler, all of those. And we reach out to a lot of people from 18 to 21 to, different demographics, and just reaching out, letting them know we're still open and we're still offering testing. And we've gotten a lot of people coming in, and they said they don't feel judged when they come in. We don't judge them for hooking up. We just ask them the same normal questions of, well, when was your last hookup? When was your last COVID test? When was your last STI test? And normalizing it with them, it just kind of slowly will spread out.
So something you touched on that I want to elaborate on a little bit more is the need for hooking up and it being almost a sense of survival, right? Can you talk maybe a little bit about what your participants have said about that?
Yeah. So when this all started, we were all under the impression 2 weeks, maybe a month, we would be closed. So we were all kind of like, cool, no big deal. But as it went on and things just got crazier last year, people did start hooking up. And at first there was all this, oh no, I would never hook up. I would never hook up. But then you would get that one person, I'm stressing out, Tommy. I hooked up with someone. I don't know what his status is. I don't know what his COVID status is. So we did have to sit down and figure out what are ways that people can hook up safely. We can't just tell people stay home. That's just not possible anymore. So with my participants, we talked about, well, how do you keep yourself safe? So it was, oh, well, I use condoms, or we hook up outside, or we, do this or that. So one thing that we kind of came up with is, if you're going to hook up with folks, ask them, when was your last COVID test? Have you been exposed to anyone who has COVID? Have you experienced any symptoms? And then it leads right into STIs. And then if you decide to meet up with someone, we've been encouraging folks, avoid any kind of like face-to-face positions, avoid kissing, because you're swapping spit. We tell folks, take a shower with whoever you may be hooking up with first, and that just washes anything that could be on either of you. And then you both smell nice. And it's just taking those extra steps of really thinking. I encourage my folks to use just a simple surgical mask while they're hooking up. Maybe it's harder to breathe, but you're keeping yourself safe. And at this point now, with a lot of them getting vaccinated, they're still not even 100% going out and hooking up without taking these precautionary steps.
Yeah. So also another thing that you both kind of touched on is that sense of shame, and that we did have a survey come out that we did, and we had about 40 respondents. And one of the biggest things that we heard from folks is they weren't sharing with members that they live with, that they were hooking up because of that shame and that fear. So have y'all had experiences with that with your participants? And can you kind of maybe elaborate on that a little bit more?
I think we have had experience with that, just not with participants, but with individuals coming and getting tested, and really talking to them and asking them like, what brings you in, and just really building up that rapport. And it's really that shame of like, oh, I'm going to be judged because I'm hooking up. I'm going to be judged if I go buy some condoms, because in March of 2020, I should have been staying home. I should have not been going out. But you know what? I was lonely. I was horny, and that is a normal thing. And so they were having a little bit of that shame. Even still to this day, we see individuals who are like, no, I can't go to patios. I can't go to restaurants, but they're on Grindr looking, and, that's fine. And it's just, that's what you need to do. But it's also kind of disclosing. You need to let individuals know if you may have been a contact to COVID, so that they know how to protect themselves. So we've been teaching individuals, well, have you had that talk? Have you normalized it? And it's really the stigma of people going on social media and shaming people. Oh, you're traveling. Oh, you're going to hook up. So people are getting scared to get tested. People are getting scared to tell their partners or friends or family that they may be been exposed to a COVID because their hookup may have had COVID when they hooked up with them or got COVID shortly after. So then they're putting others in danger. And it's kind of very similar to the AIDS epidemic a little bit that we've seen. And I know some people don't like to compare it to the AIDS epidemic, but that is the easiest way to compare it, because that is what we were experiencing during the AIDS epidemic, of individuals not disclosing or not talking about and not normalizing the virus itself.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. I actually want to move into, so thank you both so much. I'm going to move into now a conversation with Karen from SHAC. And, you know, one of the conversations that we've heard, right, is this feeling of shame. So I was wondering if you could help expand on how does shame of hooking up affect a person's mental health?
Well, I think in the queer community, it has, this this effect that is oftentimes too familiar for folks. I think being part of a kind of a bias-based population where there's a lot of stigma tends to, be shame tends to be a symptom that is managed through the development of oneself. So I think that we're seeing a lot of folks come in surprised that they're back to square one with some progress around shame. And within our community, the university community, for some students, this is their first year at university and they're in dorms. For other students, they had to return home after a year or two of being at university. And that's where some of the shame originated, is through their family systems and homes. So there's been quite an effect. On the bright side, and we heard this from Tony, one of our counselors that works with our population specifically, there has been some positive experiences, such as people becoming more close with peers. It is part of our history, our cultural history, that that togetherness is usually a resilience factor for our population. So, it's been a bit of both. There has been a direct impact on people's sexual behaviors. There's been a lot of reports that people are having to better manage and almost redesign their approach to sexual behaviors, which is actually encouraged at SHAC. I reached out to different departments within SHAC, medical and health promotions and counseling, to discuss this. And some of the things they're observing is people are continuing to engage in sexual activity, but just with an added layer of planning to decrease impulsive sexual behaviors, which are usually the unsafe behaviors. Within health promotions, there's been a discussion around how do we educate people around cultural norms with around COVID and perceived threat and danger. Within the queer community, the culture around perceived threat and danger is quite different from cis heteronormative people. And it's something that, a person can carry throughout their life. And then we get to this traumatic event of a pandemic and it is exacerbated. So, really considering maybe the cultural type traumatic experiences that different individuals experience, and then overlaying a pandemic on top of that, I think is a really good consideration.
Yeah, no, thank you. That was, I appreciate the ways that you've talked about shame in a way that doesn't feel like it's shaming, right? Because I think that even that conversation around shame, there's shame about shame, right?
Mhm.
And so one of the things that you mentioned earlier that really struck me is that, shame is a symptom that we manage, right? And I was wondering if you could elaborate on that a little bit more.
Sure. So, I this is I think this is one of my favorite symptoms to manage is personally being a queer person, having grown up locally. One of the first avenues for managing shame was the Pride Parade, right? Where people can come out, gather, and celebrate a lot of these biases that accompany shame. So in the queer community, shame was oftentimes an entry point into connectiveness and connectivity. As far as that internalized stigmatization that occurs, it's also a bit different than our more like cisgendered heteronormative population, because what we feel ashamed about tends to be really dangerous and true and reinforced through like ridicule or different types of phobias that are constant, and especially now I think during this pandemic. So it's really difficult because it seems like our cultural wisdom within the queer community, one, acknowledges that the shame you're experiencing might be biased and not true. And in fact, it isn't. And then, how do you participate in the behaviors that are, essentially who you are and not wrong or bad? So, I think, I hope that answers your question. I kind of went off on a tangent, but
No, I loved it. I really appreciate that, characterizing shame within trans and queer communities is completely different, right, than we feel it within cis normative, societies, cultures, right? And so I'm glad that you elaborated on those two, because, for a lot of folks, missing Pride this year wasn't just about we don't get to go to a parade, we don't get to go to a party, right? It was really we don't get to celebrate who we are. And I think a lot of folks just don't recognize that Pride for a lot of individuals, and I think especially in a place like New Mexico, where we have very large rural communities, Pride is at one time where they save up money to, rent a hotel room and come down and have a weekend where they can be themselves. And they can be themselves within a community who understands them. And they get to mitigate that shame, right, in these spaces. So thank you so much for elaborating on that. So there were folks who that were surveyed who have hooked up with someone outside of their homes during the pandemic, and have said that doing so helped them feel connected to others, specifically other queer folks, and help their mental health. Can you share about how maybe this would help individuals?
So I think it goes back to what I was pointing to earlier. Hookup culture is not something that is considered shameful in the community. It's usually well managed. I think, especially in Albuquerque with the resources we have, it's within arm's reach once I think your social circles begins to grow and, people start disclosing more about their experiences, that those resources become more available. So, I think to support that and encourage, a healthy, safe, hookup culture during COVID is to recognize that behaviors ought to change during this time, because has been a practice and almost a principle within the community, to weigh risk, to not be impulsive, to, have dialogue with peers around, what's safe. We've been talking a lot about contracting the virus. There's other threats. There's like financial insecurities, as someone pointed to earlier. There's, just kind of the threat of traumas resurfacing because you're living at home with your parents. And, it's really difficult to be an autonomous self. A lot of research that's, focused on our community talks about how autonomy supports a reduction of shame, and that's, a developmental change with a person is to, how do you increase your ability to practice and experience those things that you value that are really important to you. So, I think that having the philosophy of what's important to me and how do I go forward during this time in COVID, where, my life's been impacted by possible exposures, or, the fact of living at home or living in a dorm where the social pressure to not really engage with others is even higher. Considering all of that, and then, managing the calculated risk that you will take, and being open and disclosive about it, and getting kind of some feedback from your peers. It seems, the safety in numbers has worked really well in our culture. And this is, probably another place to gather that knowledge.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. I wanted to see if you could expand on what COVID has done to students who have had to move back home. You had mentioned that a little bit earlier, and how it's been harmful for some folks, and also that first year experience and not being able to participate in that. I was wondering if you could share some of that.
Sure. So moving back home, people feel as if, they're pressured to go back into the closet. Another is stress, being in an environment that is non-supportive increases stress, which then can trigger, medical issues, depending on, what a person has to deal with, like on, their DNA chain. And so, it really can bump up stress. In fact, Shack Medical reported back to me saying that they're getting a lot of patients coming in with mental health type symptoms, depression and anxiety. And for many of them, it's the first time they've ever experienced these type of symptoms. And they're completely healthy before this. And it's, their knowledge of what a mental health symptom is compared to like a medical symptom is very limited. So it's been doing a lot of work on educating people on what stress and anxiety is, and how to self-care and manage that while they're in, environments that are just very adverse to them. Non-acceptance of parents, siblings seem to be a big issue. And then also a lot of guilt around, going out to see peers, which is usually a lifeline.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I think, sometimes we look at students and we don't understand how important that social factor is. Or when we even discuss that social factor, it's kind of an abstract almost of, yes, we need to be social, but what does that look like, and how important that is for students' development. And so have you heard any conversation about how COVID has affected the first year experience?
Yeah, it's, they don't have anything to compare it to except for dashed, like dreams about their independence and coming to, their first year at the university, especially if they're in the dorms. I think oftentimes, the queer community and queer youth look forward to coming to this population because it's all about proximity and, the resources that are available, like, like your resource center, the events around that. And, I think that there's a lot of discouraged first year students that are in the dorms or living with their parents because they don't have access to something that motivated them to come into a college. I've heard a student talk about what motivated them to come here was through their high school LGBTQ Alliance group. And a lot of discussion on, just hold on until you get to college and things get better, and then how does a person then reconfigure, well, now what's motivating me? What's that carrot to be, in college and social and supported? It's been really difficult to reach out to this population because people have Zoom fatigue. It's really hard to gather, for events like these. It also, can increase one's self-consciousness because of the nature of Zoom and video conferencing. If one hasn't, dealt with or developed to a point of self-acceptance or, dealing with all the stigmas one has to deal with, and this is a really adverse platform to be social on. So, I think the experiences are great and we'll hear more about it, and it will probably change our culture as a whole, as time passes, because, it is the youth that is experiencing this.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I really, again, just appreciate that conversation of, this is affecting everybody, of course, but I think for young folks, it's affecting them in so many different ways because they don't get that developmental moment. They don't get that moment of, I can be as queer, as trans as I want to be on this campus and have this sense of perceived safety, right? Because we do have really amazing affirming policies that, I don't just say this because I work at UNM, but I am really proud of the work that UNM has done to ensure that trans and gender nonconforming individuals can come to school and can feel safe. We have strong policies. We have amazing resources at the Shack. We are in existence, and we're not just something that is uplifted for pride or whenever. Our president Stokes is actively saying, talking about LGBTQ issues, which is huge. And we've had so many students who have asked us, did you ask President Stokes to say this? And I can probably say no. President Stokes is doing this of her own volition. And so, on one hand, we have that pride of, we are a super, affirming school, come to us. But then we have this, you can come, but it's going to be really hard for you to create those relationships and to create those bonds.
Yeah, I think that will also be impacted when we return, because we can't overlook the political discord we've all experienced over the past year, and how, the stressors around that in itself, and the safety concerns around that in itself. Now we are all more conscious of a group of Americans that, you know, are all about the biases. And, you know, it's been a pretty violent year around all of this. So you know, I think that I'm glad President Stokes does talk about these issues. And I think that there's more change to come. You know, I agree with you. I think at SHAC, what excites me the most is how open to education our providers are. You know, we may not be experts on any of this, but there is definitely openness around training and how quickly things change, and how willing people are around this dialogue. And I think that's going to be especially necessary as we move forward into, you know, the next fall semester. And, you know, I invite any of the panelists here to come to SHAC to provide us with some in-services and trainings that tends to support what we're doing here.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And, you know, and when I was, I utilized SHAC services, and, you know, I always had a really positive experience. So I think that we have a really good team at SHAC. So I'm really, you know, thankful that you're here also to share that expertise. So we do have some questions that are just open to everybody. So what we'll do is I will ask these questions, and then everybody feel free to chime in. You know, and so we can, and this part is going to be more of a conversation between all of us. So we have heard that students who are trans and non-binary have had to detransition for safety, as well as students have had to go back into the closet for safety reasons. Have you all also heard similar stories? Or can you share how that experience would impact you if you were a freshman coming in? Oh, now y'all are quiet.
So I haven't heard of that about with COVID, but I will tell you my experience is sometimes I get stuck in a rut and a loop where I don't leave my house and I don't shave my face, and I look at myself and I think, am I really trans? You know, I haven't, you know, and so that's what my takeaway from that question is. I've had to question my trans identity a few times over the past year. And, you know, after I shave and you know, I'm like, what was I thinking? You know, but I can see how this would be hard on a 19-year-old or 18-year-old or even a 20-something-year-old coming into college and then having to go back. Like y'all said, to go back to their parents' house and not have that liberation. Like, yeah, it would be, I would probably be suicidal, to be very honest with you, if I had to go through that. So I didn't think about all that until y'all were talking about it. So my heart is hurting for teenagers and right now. So thanks for the work y'all are doing.
Thank you, Bunny. Thank you.
I would say for Teen Empower, we have seen that a lot where individuals who have said that they are transgender are getting misgendered by their parents, even though that they've educated them and told them these are the pronouns I'm using, this is the name I'm going by. And it's even, we're finding with parents who are very supportive of individuals and support the transition, we don't know if they're doing it on purpose or what it is, but we have seen that a lot with our Teen Empower, where we're experiencing that, where also gay kids are not saying that they're gay at home, that they didn't have Common Bond, they didn't have Teen Empower, they didn't have a lot of these resources to go to. They couldn't openly talk about, even though we offered certain things online, they couldn't go onto a Zoom call because they would fear their safety because of individuals within their household who did not support them being part of the LGBTQI plus community. So we have experienced that a lot. And I would say for us here at the space, we've seen it more with our teens, 18 and under.
Thank you. Thank you. Something that Bunny said that I wanted to actually see if both Michael and Bunny, if you could touch on this. But Bunny, you had said that, you know, those visual cues had you questioning your trans identity. And so I was wondering, what kind of services does TGRC and AM provide, like gender affirming services in particular? And also maybe if you could elaborate, Karen, for SHAC as well. But what are some of those services that are provided, even things like razors, right? Like we don't understand how important
Yeah.
razors can be. So I was wondering if y'all could share some of that.
I know we have at the Trans Center, I don't know if we have them on hand today because I'm not there, but typically we have razors on hand. I'm going to be talking to Michael about about a Trans Day of Visibility event that I have in mind, where we have a swag bag with quality razors, because sometimes we don't get quality razors donated and we don't have access to, which we're grateful for any razors, but you know, if I'm going to shave my legs, I don't need a dollar store razor. I need a Gillette Venus, or so that, you know, we do have sometimes minimal razors and sometimes we have better razors from my experience. That might be different now that Michael's there. So I'll let him follow up on that, on my answer.
We do have hygiene and self-care items at the center. To Bunny's point, the razors and things that we have are not always of the best quality. So that is certainly something that we are always looking to improve as far as what we can purchase, what we can have donated, etc. In addition to that, we have been very fortunate and blessed to be working with a group called Orenda Tribe, who gave some really amazing donations. One of 3 pallets of clothing, brand new clothing, literally like in the tags, as well as makeup, which has been really, truly life-changing for a lot of our participants. Things like having makeup to wear that actually matches your skin tone versus whatever somebody, you know, just happened to donate is really life-changing for folks, as well as having proper undergarments, undergarments that affirm who you are versus undergarments that you were just able to scrounge up. So those items are things that we have. Right now we have a lot of makeup and we have a good number of clothes, but things that we could always use would be things like razors of better quality, as well as undergarments, underwear, bras, yeah, those sorts of things. We absolutely, every time we have them, we provide them, and we provide them for free. We're a very low barrier to no barrier type organization, where it's our goal and our mission to help and empower other people.
And also just Bunny and Michael, if you could maybe just, I want to do a quick plug for y'all. If people do want to donate, how can they do that? And also, is it a tax? Can they get a tax deduction for it?
TGRC NM is a 501c3 nonprofit recognized by the federal government as well as the state of New Mexico. So individuals that donate can use that as a tax write-off for themselves. You can donate online at tgrcnm.org, and you can also text to donate, and I can put that in the chat if necessary, but that's TGRC leads. So that's leads with a plural with an S as in Sam. And you can text that to 44321. And that'll just bring up the direct link where individuals can donate. We also accept donations at our thrift store, Thrift a Lot in Albuquerque, which is on Lomas, just south of San Mateo. And you can donate items to the thrift store. Those proceeds help to keep TGRC in business. You can also donate non-perishable shelf-stable items for bunny bags. You can bring those directly to Thrift a Lot as well. You can also donate cash for bunny bags at Thrift a Lot also.
Great, thank you. So Karen, can you maybe talk a little bit about people having to go back in the closet or detransition?
So at SHAC, Yeah, I think that we've talked a bit about, the pressures of family, around one's autonomy, but, I think the telehealth and Zoom access has had a benefit around, being in the closet, which is access to, things like medical services, or, maybe dipping one's toe into HRT type consultations, which can be, conducted in person, or, through a Zoom telehealth appointment. So those are services that continue at SHAC. We've seen an increase of counseling as well, because some people just have a preference for starting this counseling journey, through Zoom. There's a level of privacy that they didn't have before, and there's a level of kind of like self-consciousness, or like exposure that is managed through this method. On the other side of this, not everyone has loved Zoom, and we can see people in person, and that's all based by appointment and dependent on treatment plans in counseling. Our condiment, our health promotions department had the condiment sites around campus. A lot of campus isn't open, and there's not a lot of people on campus, just kind of living their lives as students here. So they made a workaround by you can go on the SHAC website, send an email, and you can come by SHAC and pick up things like condoms. I think there has been an increase of parents calling SHAC, which is interesting, because we're not able to, at all talk to someone's parent around their health or mental health needs. But, with their family members, with their children being either in the dorms or at home, and tensions have increased, parents have been reaching out to see what services are available to them. So there's been a lot of education with parents, just letting them know, actually, the best thing you can do is to allow your student to be autonomous, and, how do you support them in the decisions they make going forward? And, sometimes more importantly, you have a bias, and, is this something you're willing to learn about or get more information on? Or, it seems like you really want to talk about this. Here are some mental health resources for you yourself. So, there's been a benefit, and, some terrible outcomes around, being forced into the closet. But at this point, it also, people are becoming really creative, and, the environment has changed with Zoom, and people are, engaging a bit in different ways with SHAC.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I want to go back to Michael real quick, because I think Michael had something else to add about detransitioning.
I think that's something that's super important to remember when it comes to COVID, is that it's not just shutting down restaurants and bars and things like that. It's also restricting individuals' access to healthcare, which includes gender affirming care. I know of several individuals who have had gender affirming surgeries canceled, postponed, etc., because of COVID, because their care was seen as quote unquote elective versus gender affirming and life-saving. Individuals that are sometimes living with some resource insecurity, that don't have ready access to do things like telehealth, and their health clinics where they receive things like hormones and medications are closed or very heavily restricted as far as, hours and staffing. Those things also impact trans and non-binary and gender non-conforming folks in a way where maybe somebody doesn't want to detransition, but now they don't have access to what they need to maintain their health, whether that's their physical health, their mental health, etc. So those are all things to keep in mind as well.
Wow, that's really important to remember. So thank you so much for sharing that. And that kind of leads into a question we had in our Q&A. As healthcare and community care providers, how has the pandemic changed your outlook on providing resources for the LGBTQ community?
I would say for us, it's been a little bit difficult. It's been individuals who we've had to get into care when the pandemic happened. It became difficult for individuals who were tested HIV positive or who were already HIV positive to get into care. And it made some individuals become from undetectable to detectable or get to that undetectable status. Also on the HIV, it's been the COVID has been the focus, I think, a lot. So a lot of it has been, what about syphilis? What about chlamydia? What about gonorrhea? Like, what about those? And one of the things that we've talked about, and one of my fears is when we get COVID under control, we're going to have an outbreak of these other STIs, and especially individuals within the LGBT community, because they're where they normally would have gotten tested, where they felt comfortable to get tested, they haven't gone because they weren't either open or the services weren't provided, or maybe it's just simple as they don't know that we're open or those particular areas are open for them to get the services that they need.
Yeah, thank you for that.
I think how it'll impact, services going forward is, and this is coming from this conversation, I think, I'll be talking to my peers, the counselors at SHAC around screening questions, and how important it is to start interacting with, students around, how has this impacted your sexual behaviors, or how has this impacted your self-perception, or, really kind of engaging the students around these questions instead of waiting for that therapeutic alliance and that level of safety and comfort for those more, vulnerable type conversations to occur. So I think that's something that I'll take back from this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. I did want to ask, though, because it's kind of been brought up here and there, in what ways are things like Zoom, Google Meets, all of those things, what ways can be triggering for trans, and maybe even specifically for gender nonconforming folks?
I can say the first thing would potentially be steady access. Not everyone has, a device that can be connected to the internet at any time with a working webcam, microphone, etc. So the first thing would be access. And then the second thing would be individuals that may not feel comfortable sharing, something as simple as their voice or, their face. With a room potentially of strangers. There's 21 people in here, 11 of them are attendees, most of which I've never met before in my life. And I am now telling people that not only do I work for the Transgender Resource Center of New Mexico, but also that I am trans. So that in of itself can be terrifying for some people. So keeping those things in mind, safety, comfortability, access, us moving to a more virtual world allows us to be connected more, but it also creates a little bit of potential trauma for individuals.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else?
I will say with my adult group, I have a wide variety of folks who do attend. So a lot of my trans girls who weren't attending any of my online Zoom meetups I was having. So that did cause me to have to kind of sit down and think outside that box and meet them where they're at. So one girl, it's strictly text, another one it's email, another one it's Instagram message, and they will never join it. So we found that with Zoom, it worked for some people, but for those that it didn't work, we had to meet them where they were at and maybe download additional apps and whatnot, but it worked so that way they still felt involved and checked on.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I want to switch gears a little bit. And we know that trans and queer folks have generational trauma when it comes to interacting with the medical community. Bunny, you've kind of touched on these, but what would be some concerns LGBTQ folks have in regards to getting the vaccine?
I think just feeling safe and secure, seeing other people, seeing other trans folks got it and were treated okay. You know, that's why I posted that I got mine, and seeing that it's okay, that it's safe, and that we're going to be treated with respect.
Bunny, if you don't mind, can you actually share what the process was like for you to get the vaccine? And Michael, I know you've mentioned that y'all are getting vaccinated as well. So if anyone wants to share about what that process was like, was there a question about like sex assignment at birth, gender identity, any of those things?
And I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe there was an option for not female, male, and the other. I believe so. And later on we can go through the profile system and see. But I believe there's an option to not disclose or other. There's at least 3 options for your gender. It was unexpected that I got the text because I'm overweight, I'm a smoker, so I do have some high risk groups, but I got the text and I'm a crier, so I got the text and I cried and I put myself together because they send out 150 codes for events to only have 100 spots. So, and I knew that dealing with my mother. So I put myself together and I got the appointment and I just started crying. And my mom and dad said, "What's the matter?" And I said, "I'm getting the vaccine on Thursday." And so I think most trans people have a fear of going to the hospital. And I weighed up the fear of versus getting shot by a pharmacist or being incapacitated in the hospital as a trans person. And the fear of not being vaccinated outweighed the fear of being vaccinated. So that's what worked for me.
Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else?
I'll have to like piggyback off what Bunny was saying, like getting the vaccine and maybe having a sore arm or maybe like some of the reactions you hear about in the news outweighed having to end up in the hospital with COVID. I've been in the hospital as a trans man before and dying anaphylactic shock, and the concern was more of, well, what's wrong with your chest? Why did you have surgery? Not the fact that my throat was swelling shut. So for me, it was that like, well, do I get the vaccine? What if I have a reaction? So I had that fear. I had my EpiPens with me of what if, but I felt safe. I actually felt very comfortable. And then as far as registering, I believe Bunny's right. There is a third option where you can register as male, female, or other. But there was no question about it at the actual, like once you got there. There's a medical questionnaire you have to fill out beforehand. And I don't really remember what's on there, but they just check to make sure that's all filled out. But other than that, they were all really respectful and nice when I went.
And I think Department of Health is really, they are trying to move forward and be understanding that everybody is different, and we have undocumented individuals, we have LGBTQ individuals, we have so many individuals. So I believe that Department of Health is trying to make those very inclusive, of where you can pick your gender of male, female, or other, or you can choose not to answer it. The medical questionnaire is asking for so that they can be prepared. Have you had COVID within the last, 14 days? Are you feeling sick? And it's really just for their information so that they know what to prepare for when they're giving you that vaccine in case you faint or anything. I think as an LGBT individuals, we have that fear as very similar to those individuals who are undocumented. When we go to a physician, sometimes we feel ashamed based on the type of who we are. Somebody who's undocumented is afraid of, I know I need to get this, but it's going to happen. And I think it's sometimes the same the myths that we hear about vaccines, like what we are hearing about, well, this is what it is about a vaccine. And it's very much of those of the Spanish influencers or Spanish culture that we hear that is, oh, they're giving you the virus. Well, no, they're not giving you the virus. And it's just those myths that we hear of the vaccine. So I think as LGBT, it's very similar with, people of color of some of the fears that we may be experiencing.
Yeah. I have a question, and this wasn't on the question sheet, so I apologize for that. But something that came to mind is, what can we as trans and queer leaders, what sort of messaging can we help create to encourage LGBTQ folks to get the vaccine? Yeah, Bunny.
I would just really push that it's safe, that I've done it, and that it beats being in the hospital as a trans person with no advocate for you. And that that it's safe, I'm Mexican myself, and I live in a household with other Mexicans as my family and my roommate Jesse. And my mom didn't want to get it. She said, I don't know if they're doing brujeria on me. I don't know if they're, and it's just the way that Mexicans think. We think differently than non-Mexicans and even other either I'm sorry, we think different than other Latin countries too. And I just really had to have a talk with my mom. Like, look, it's safe. No, you're better off. It's the same conversation with trans people. You're better off getting the shot.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Bunny.
You're welcome.
I also find that being completely honest about what you're experiencing. Some people will say they got the shot and they were totally fine, and maybe that wasn't the case. When I got my shot, I wrote a very detailed status about what I felt. And I had some people tell me, oh, you weren't feeling like COVID symptoms. You were feeling other things, but sticking to your guns about what it is you felt and experienced, because you're the only one who knows, you felt it. And being honest and answering whatever questions you can, and letting people know sometimes, I don't know the answer, and I don't want to give you wrong information.
Thank you.
I think the process can be overwhelming, filling out the application or going onto the website or having to call. We have elderly LGBT people. We have a different range of people who are not tech savvy. So I think, and not everybody's going to know. So I think it can be overwhelming. Going to somebody who going to an organization such as TGRC, the UNM Resource Center here at the space, Midtown Department of Health, go to anybody that you know and that you trust that's going to help you and answer any questions that you have, and who's going to be honest and say, I don't know that answer. Let me see if I can find it, and let me help you. If you want to register for this, let me help you, and let's walk through it together. I think that's the important thing, because it can be overwhelming. It can be scary.
Thank you. Karen or Michael, is there anything you would like to add?
I would echo Tommy's sentiments about individuals being open and honest about their experience, as well as sharing information that they have. The questionnaires that are part of the registration process are really just for demographics. The vaccines that we get come from the federal government, who loves data and statistics. So the more data and statistics that we can give them about the fact that folks living in New Mexico want the vaccine, are trying to register, the more vaccines we get. So keeping things like that in mind are super important. And also talking about our personal experiences with not only the registration process, but the actual process of getting the vaccine. Nobody touched me or felt me up. No one asked me weird, personal, irrelevant questions. It wasn't about my gender. It wasn't about my expression. It was about, have you been sick today? Do you have adverse reactions or a history of adverse reactions to vaccines? And, you know, like, it was very comfortingly clinical. It wasn't about like doing weird stuff and like asking inappropriate questions. It was about, great, you're here for the vaccine, have a seat, jab, off you go. Next. Very that. So keeping those things in mind are really important to share with our communities. And then also, as Josh was saying, connecting to resources that can help bridge the gap for folks that aren't tech savvy or don't know the best way to navigate registering. Something that I've been doing for TGRC is keeping my eyes and ears posted for not only any sort of vaccine clinics being provided in the community, but also potentially for what we can do at TGRC to potentially become a vaccine clinic at some point in the future. Of course, there's, you know, lots of unknowns, but the more information we have, the better we are.
Awesome, thank you. So one thing I want to close out on is a conversation that I think came up with every single one of you all. And it's this notion of space, right? And this notion of having a space to call home. And whether it's the TGRCNM, whether it's the space itself, the LGBTQ Resource Center, also whether it's places like the Social Club, FX, Sidewinders, these places that I think sometimes people don't understand the necessity for a place like FX, right? Where it is a home for trans and queer folks, where sometimes we don't, you know, and that the pandemic has closed a lot of those safe spaces for us. So I wanted to see if maybe we could have that conversation about what that has done to you and also what you've seen it do to other individuals.
No,
Go ahead, Bunny.
my whole social life is built around the queer community, and it's built around uplifting the queer community. And all the bars are my home. It's the space that Empower is my home. TGRC is my home. I feel at home at the UNM LGBTQ Resource Center. And at Swink Salon, I went to go pick up some donations at Swink Salon the other day, and I've been twice over the last year. Normally I'm there. I just started crying, you know, like I miss home. I miss my queer homes. And I'm very blessed. I live in a 6-bedroom house with my family who loves and adores and encourages me. And I'm feeling that way. I can't imagine what people who don't have the resources I do that are feeling that way. You know, so my heart, you know, I'm trying my best to support from afar, and it's been very difficult. I want us all to be home together.
Yeah, thank you. Michael.
As an individual who moved to a new city and a new state in the middle of a pandemic for a new job in a new career field, it's been incredibly isolating to not have those spaces where you can actually meet a new person, a new friend in person in a safe space. No, you cannot come to my home, random strangers. No, the apps are not like, it's not the best place to try to meet a new friend or even to connect with, you know, a former acquaintance or something along those lines. So not having those physical spaces, whether they're closed or whether there are extreme limitations on how you can utilize those spaces, it can really be isolating for individuals as queer and trans and gender nonconforming individuals that might fall somewhere within the spectrum, we live in a society that is very heteronormative, that is very cisgender focused, that is very patriarchal. And so we live in a space that was already not designed to celebrate us, that was not designed to love us, to support us, to lift us up. So we have created these spaces of our own, and we don't have ready access to them at the moment. So it's definitely something to consider and to think about, and to try to do our best to follow all the precautions so that we can get our spaces back, and also to create, as Tommy mentioned earlier, new ways to interact with one another so no one feels left out.
Thank you.
I think it's like Bunny said, these are all of our homes. These, for me, it's been rough. Because think about it, and during the AIDS epidemic, when we would lose people, a lot of their families wouldn't want to hold a memorial service for them or a celebration for them. So it was individuals who were holding these in the bar. And I remember sitting down with Bunny, and Bunny saying that when she was a bartender, hearing and seeing a lot of these individuals who were passed, and then planning a show for them. I think it's been hard because we've lost many people within our communities, and we can't celebrate their life. We can't mourn them like we're used to. We can't be like, you know what, we're going to hold a show for them, and we're going to honor their life and celebrate them, and, you know, make sure that their memory is alive, where we just want to hug one another because we need that hug, where it's like, you know what, I've had a rough day, Frankie, let's meet at social club and let's just have a drink and BS around, you know, the table, just to relieve that stress. I think that's what it's been hard for a lot of individuals. They don't have those spaces. They don't have a lot of things, and it's just not being able to be with one another and have that support. And especially mourning, I think that's the biggest thing, is we've lost so many people over 2020, and we can't mourn them, I think, the way that we are used to mourning them and celebrating their life.
Yeah, thank you for that. So it is 1:28. I can't believe it's been an hour and a half. This morning I was like, it's going to be 30 minutes and we're going to be done. And I forgot that, you know, Bunny talks a lot. I'm just kidding, Bunny. But I do want to thank you all so much for taking your time and being here with us today. I know I've gotten a lot out of this conversation. I'm sure others have as well. Thank you all again for those who are watching. Thank you to the panelists. And if y'all actually don't mind putting your contact in the chat, so if folks want to reach out to you, they can with any specific questions. And Annie Swift says, thank you all so much. So thank you. We are actually recording this. It is on our Facebook Live, and we will actually have it as a YouTube video as well that will be parked on our website. And I'll share the link with you all so we can share it wide. Thank you all again. I hope you have a great day. Do something kind for yourselves, and we will see you all later. Thank you.